Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. I hope everyone enjoyed the good weather today.
Yes.
And tonight, we'll be having a conversation with a local citizen-led group, Friends for Democracy, who interviewed and assessed 10 candidates from the 7th Congregational District of Illinois on issues of relevance to the Jewish community, antisemitism, and Israel, and Zionism. And I'm excited to hear what they have to say, because we're in this cycle of rapidly changing world events that is affecting the landscape of this political race and the national political landscape as well. And just in the last few weeks, there have been significant changes in how some of the candidates and their campaigns have addressed these issues, and at least one major pivot. And really, this is a national phenomenon that we're seeing in many races throughout the country. In my sense, at least, the part of the impetus for this work and why so many of us feel so interested and invested in it is because of everything that's happened since October 7th, 2023. And it really swept so many of our assumptions from under our feet, witnessing the rise of anti-Semitism on the right and on the left, and finding a political home on the left for those who care about Israel has become more complicated. And when you mix into it the security complications since the Pittsburgh shootings, we now find ourselves at this moment of challenge that demands of us our full civic engagement as a community and a certain Solomonic wisdom about how we navigate this minefield. And then the war in Iran happened. And I just wanted to bring for context two recent studies, one that said that over 85% of all Jews believe Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, but less than 40% who call themselves Zionists. And another study, even more recent, that for the first time ever, more Americans sympathize more with the Palestinian cause than with Israel. So a few words just to introduce Friends for Democracy, and I love the name because they really are a citizens-led organization created by impassioned and very capable community members, all members of our local Jewish community, and they'll tell us more about why they decided to take on this project. So I asked them in preparation for tonight's event, is tonight about telling us who to vote for in the elections in just over a week? And they said, no, there's already so much advocacy out there. But this is purely an educational project, and to remind us that we have a significant political voice in this space of this race. And I can say that as a leader in the Jewish community, how grateful I am and we are for already the professional and fair and thorough work they've done in presenting all of their findings, and also relating some of our concerns to the candidates through their conversations. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Diane Redleaf and Hillary Lieb, who are co-founders of the organization, who bring different expertise and leadership experience analyzing and presenting data and doing outreach. Hillary's an economist with leadership experience of many different organizations, and Diane is a human rights lawyer with a background in policy advocacy. And Sandra Sokol is an institution in Oak Park to herself, and was village clerk for 16 years, and through many of her personal relationships was a key member of this team in connecting to the campaigns of all the different candidates. And finally, Michael Zmora, who in just a few years has become, maybe we can say, the main chronicler and historian of our local Jewish community. And we all know him as a tireless researcher and even-headed observer and commentator on society and politics. We can call you the dream team. So there'll be limited time for questions from the audience. If you'd like to write a question, cards were handed out, and maybe in about 30, 45 minutes, Andy Isaacs, who's also a member of Friends for Democracy, will pick up the cards and we'll be able to take those questions. We may not have time to get to all of them. If you are online, you can write your questions to online participation at wsthz.org. That's online participation at wsthz.org. And so first I'd like to turn over to you, Diane. Can you tell us how did all this get started? the origins and your motivations.
Okay. So first I'll just summarize briefly what we did. We held our first formal meeting on November 10th, 2025, and that evening there were 8 of us who came together and we decided on our name, and we started to hone in right away on the congressional race in our district as a key project we needed to put together and carry out before the primary deadline on March 17th. Hillary and I presented a detailed agenda for that meeting, and we got down to business right away. Between mid-December and mid-January, we conducted 9 candidate in-person interviews, each at least an hour long, at our members' homes, and we evaluated 10 candidates on multiple measures related to anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and Israel. We launched our website on January 27th. We expanded our toolkit on February 18th, and we've continued to refine it since with few further revisions just last week. So we've been very busy, and we've done a huge amount of work in a short time, and it's been very intense. But then how did Hillary and I come up with that detailed, no-nonsense agenda for a group that didn't even know each other? So that's what I wanted to tell you about. How did we form the group? What were we trying to do, both in the short term and the long term? So this group actually traces to an event in April that got me feeling compelled to do something about left-wing anti-Semitism. And so that event was just kind of shocked me into action. As Rabbi said, I'm a civil rights lawyer and a child and family advocate, and I identify with being on the left side of the aisle. And that's where I've spent my professional life. I'm also married to a refusenik who's sitting there, and certainly he grew up with firsthand experience of direct left-wing anti-Semitism. Over the past 6 years, I think we've all been seeing increasing anti-Zionism, the view that Israel isn't a legitimate homeland, and of course tensions increased on October 7th, but they didn't begin there. We've heard the buzzwords of good and evil in terms of oppressor, oppressed, indigenous, colonial, white, not white, Zionism equals racism, and the word intersectionality, which showed its face in the child welfare arena with lectures on why everyone needed to care about Palestine in order to fix the child welfare system in America. So in this world, it's a world in which racism is a central issue, but anti-Semitism is viewed as an issue for the right and not the left. I personally avoided getting involved, partly because my own sister is an ardent anti-Zionist activist in the Twin Cities, and I just didn't want to court more tension with her. But on April 19th, I went to a rally in downtown Chicago at Daley Plaza, and I was hoping to lend my voice to the movement against authoritarianism. But what I found there was repeated anti-Israel rhetoric front and center, chants from the river to the sea, from the podium. And when a speaker from Muslim Americans for Palestine said the words, October 7th, I didn't want to hear what he had to say next. So I plugged my ears and left in shock and dismay and worry. How had we gotten to the point where from the river to the sea was being chanted by thousands of people in downtown Chicago who had gathered to oppose authoritarianism from the right? So that was a moment of clarity. That was not the rally I thought I was attending. And my next thoughts were, if I can't participate in the democracy movement, what does that say about where we are now as a country? What does it say about the Democratic Party and where it is heading if it adopts this sentiment of the people chanting here in this crowd? And what are the risks of a crackdown from the right? That was really what I was most afraid of, this being used as an excuse by the right. I wanted to know, how would this happen? Where was the Jewish community? Who was in conversation with the rally organizers? Who was representing mainstream Jewish voters? Why had we not been at the table to stop that? There were no Israeli flags there, but there were plenty of Palestinian flags and people wearing keffiyehs. So I thought a group response was needed. I couldn't go to talk to the rally organizers by myself. Who would go with me? Where was that group that could talk some sense into the rally organizers to see why, about why our community was being shunned and what that would possibly mean for the cause of anti-authoritarian cause? I found our community was not well coordinated in these spaces, and there's plenty of reasons why that is. So what did I do? After searching and not finding a national group to help, or even a local group that could, I started reaching out to friends, lawyers, policy people, volunteers, people experienced with research and public engagement. I reached out to folks from Oak Park, and 4 of us from Oak Park and 4 of us from Evanston, and we started to talk about what we could do. We identified a clear gap, and we had a very big worry about the younger leaders on the rise, and this was right around the time of the Mamdani election, which gave some fuel to our concern. So by the time the midterms were really starting to approach, we decided to formalize our efforts and focus on the upcoming race in our district. So we split the group in 2, and the Evanston people worked on their election campaign, and we got to work, and we reached out to add more people to the group and decide what we would do to educate ourselves and educate the candidates at the same time. We wanted to provide voters with information, and we wanted to provide information to the candidates. The Congressional Evaluation Project is not an end in itself. It was, in our minds, a way to build a stronger voice and a deeper understanding in the minds of the candidates, to build a relationship with them. And we believe in participating in the democratic process and being included in movements for social justice and democracy. We want dialogue rather than slogans, and we're against code words that call for the destruction of Israel. So that's the spirit of the project. Along the way, as Rabbi said, we had many twists and turns, and I'm going to turn it over to Hillary to tell you more about the actual evaluation project.
Thank you and good evening. Okay, so coming from what Diane just said, wanting to evaluate the candidates on our issues was a key motivation for this endeavor. How to best do this evolved over time.
Hillary, hold it up close. Yes.
Better? Can you hear me now? Great, okay, thank you, that was helpful. With the goals of consistency and transparency always guiding our decision-making. We did in-depth research on each candidate prior to their interviews. We interviewed 9 of the 10 who we determined were viable based on FEC and other information we had at the time. And post the interview, we continued our research to ensure the respective candidates' responses remained consistent with their existing public record. The most recent of these was done on March 3rd. Candidates came to our homes for interviews where at least 4 members of our group participated. Each person, including the candidate, introduced themselves. Members of our committee stressed why the topics we were about to embark on were important to them from a personal view. Our questions that followed were designed to help determine the candidates' understanding of key issues of concern and their stance on specific policy issues. Although we had only 7 broad categories within each of these, we had potential follow-up inquiries if the candidate did not address the topic we were going to evaluate them on. This resulted in a more natural conversation about our issues while ensuring every issue we want to cover was. An example of this would be our discussion during the interview of growing anti-Semitism. Beginning with, let's talk about anti-Semitism and the astronomical increase in anti-Semitism in the United States, followed by, what do you think is fueling the surge in anti-Semitism? The initial question resulted with almost none of the candidates addressing all the subtopics we had. but every candidate included right-wing, white supremacist-type anti-Semitism in their preliminary remarks. What wasn't addressed was one of the most important things we felt we needed to find out about, and this was if they understood that there was a surge in anti-Semitism on the left. Did they know what left-wing anti-Semitism even was, and what might be fueling that surge? And of course, what would they do as a Congress member to stop left and right-wing anti-Semitism? Many of the candidates truly did not know what left-wing anti-Semitism was, but many wanted to and cared when they learned more. Thus, we embraced the opportunity to help educate those candidates who were open to this. This occurred during the interview itself or after, when they could review the information sheets we handed them. We also encouraged interested candidates to utilize the information on our website under our toolkit, which we encourage everyone to do. Along with our probing the candidates by anti-Semitism, generated both from the right and the left, we asked about Zionism and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The policies we covered during our interview included, but were not limited to, BDS, federal funding of Israel, anti-Semitism, safety and security concerns of the Jewish community. We also asked them how they would deal with rhetoric such as globalize the Intifada and Louis Farrakhan's anti-Semitic tropes, the latter which unfortunately continue to be an issue in our district. Our last question related to, if elected, how would they work with our community and how best could we work with them? And of course, we gave them an opportunity to ask us any questions they might have. After the candidates left the interview, each committee member filled in their evaluation form that covered the issues you see on our website. So I hope all of you have seen it. If not, please go look at it when you get a chance. These responses were collated, then discussed, and a ranking determined for each. Qualitative analysis is limited, and I can tell you as someone who does quantitative analysis, this was a challenge for me. But what we want to make sure, since qualitative analysis is limited in the nuance that it can capture, we included both carefully written narratives based on the interviews and extensive research, and detailed footnotes where appropriate. Sometimes our research and subsequent statements candidates made did not square with what they told us, so we had to do continued processing in our group to reach consensus as to what that meant for the overall ranking. Timing of each editing is noted on our webpage. Unfortunately, in each and every situation where the candidates whose evaluation was affected went in the direction of less supportive of our community. Since we viewed each candidate as a potential leader in our community, the interview was a vehicle to not only evaluate their exchanges with us, but also to foster a relationship in hopes of continuing to keep them informed and to ideally work with them on efforts related to our issues in the future. Before ending, first I want to give a quick shout out to Andy Isaacs, who was here tonight with his sign telling us when we're going over time, thank you. And he's basically was our, he has managed our outreach efforts, and we couldn't have done it without him, and that's true for Sherry Gilly, who did our website. So I just wanted to give a shout out to both of them. I also like to tell you how best to use our evaluations. Just to reiterate again, we are not endorsing any candidate, rather reviewing their stance on issues important to our communities and those who support us, i.e., this is one of many issues we assume you are concerned about. Next, the rankings and color-coded bars give you a general idea of where the candidates stand, green being the most positive, then dark blue with lighter blue, moving in the direction of less supportive to neutral, then shades of pink to red, the latter being not supportive at all. So the bar above each candidate's narratives is giving you a visual, but you have to go farther. As noted, extensive research and discussion inform these evaluations. To better understand the nuance of these, you are strongly encouraged to both read the short narratives of each candidate and to review the references highlighted throughout the documents. We believe our evaluations do a good job of capturing where the candidates stand on our issues. We are aware that voters, when considering our issues, have a continuum of what they find acceptable. The evaluation should provide a good grounding on where the candidates are relative to your own set of expectations. We did not look at all issues, since we were acutely aware of our limitations of doing this. At the same time, we observed that there are many evaluations out there, more inclusive issue-wise, but they often do not do justice to our concerns and can even lead to be very misleading, sometimes implying that a candidate's stance on our issues is not problematic, when in fact it might be. We feel that there are candidates who have and will continue to generate hate and/or will not take our concerns seriously and will hurt our community and democracy if elected. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just like to, as many of you I'm sure have seen the website, compliment you on a beautifully informative website. And Sherry, thank you. Thank you, Sherry. So I'd like to turn to Sandra. And given all your years working in government, what is your wisdom about managing our community's relationships with the candidates and their campaigns? And we've talked a lot about our voice in this race, having a voice in the race. Do you have any thoughts or words of caution about how to best leverage that voice? And maybe talk about your role in this whole process, if you're able.
Good evening. This is not my forte, but here I am. See, this is how we start off. There you go. Thank you. I was going to make a joke saying I'll be the only person with papers, assuming everyone would have their cell phone, but look, we all have papers. Wow. I don't know if I have words of wisdom, but I would like to just say a few things about myself. I grew up in the South Bronx, and I was the first person in my family to go to college. And I lived in a mostly Jewish community and Puerto Rican community, and I taught school in the South Bronx, the majority of the students being from Puerto Rico. Never thought I'd leave New York. My husband and I got married right after college, where we met, and we did not go away to school. And I was involved with the first teacher strike in New York under Albert Shanker, for those of you who may have heard of him. And I was never involved other than making my signs, protesting. And then my husband lost his job, and he was in graduate school, and we had to move. Well, we had to find a job, even though I wanted to just go to teach, let my mother take care of our 9-month-old child. But he became very macho, and he said he had to find a job. We wind up in Macomb, Illinois, and we are the only Jewish couple on the faculty of Western Illinois University. Every child had blonde hair, and our son had black hair, as I did. And we were very different. We'd never been in a community like that. There were maybe 5 single male professors in history and English, and that was it. We knew we couldn't stay there. We did have another child there, and after 3 years, we came to the Chicago area. My husband got a job at UIC. So we don't know anybody, we don't know where to go, and we thought we had to rent. And so we did look in Oak Park, and we couldn't find anything. They weren't showing apartments. We did schlep around a bit, and we wound up in Park Forest for 1 year, and miraculously, early tenure, and we bought a house in Oak Park for a variety of reasons. It was a diverse community, the schools were good, the transportation was good, et cetera, et cetera. And we were told by our realtor that we shouldn't buy our house where we did on Washington and Taylor Avenue. And the realtor said, people like you live near Man's School. And we're like, what are you talking about? People like us, Man's School? You know, so that was a little steering, which I didn't know anything about steering. I didn't know anything, frankly. So we lived in our house for many years. Now we live in a condo. Our kids grew up here. Why do I say that? Because the candidates today, they all have to tell you there's a tale, not all, several, they're tales of woe. And that's how they start off campaigning. So it's getting on my nerves, frankly, and that's why I wanted to share, because to me it was not a tale of woe. I loved growing up in the South Bronx. And we, of course, assumed we'd go back to New York, but we've been here for many, many years, and we're not going back to New York. We did get involved, both of us, immediately because of what we experienced. Lots of apartments, we couldn't find an apartment, telling us not to live where we bought our house. And the schools were like, oh my God, blacks are moving in. They didn't even know what to do. The teachers didn't even know how to work with children who were not white Christian children, frankly. And that has continued, to be perfectly honest, with our own children. And if you don't pay attention and you don't get involved, you don't really know about the community. Yes, most of us vote, but we need more people to vote. So more personal information than you really wanted to know, but in a lot of this preparation, and believe me, this was a job. For me, it was a job. And I was honored to be asked and amazed to work with these wonderful 10 people on the committee, and learned a lot and did more info. Amongst stuff that I collect for whatever reason, I found a paper about a book that was written in 2008 by Mayor Koch of New York City. And he wrote this book called The Koch Papers, My Fight Against Anti-Semitism During His Years as a Congressman and as Mayor, with a voice decrying anti-Jewish discrimination. We all know about past history, but many people, they don't even know about the Holocaust, and they don't want to know. And it happened in our high school and in our community, and you need to know that. So, on to my papers and my little personal history. Getting involved, oh my goodness, it's my time, almost. I worked with folks in Oak Park and in our surrounding communities, elected officials, many of whom I have mentored. I worked for the village in community relations for years and learned a lot. I was always quiet, but an observer. And when I was elected village clerk, it was like amazing. I had run campaigns quietly, doing research, etc. I met many, many elected people, and a clerk is not in charge of legislating or policy, but you sure sit through a lot of meetings and you learn a lot. And I've worked internationally with clerks and learned from them as well. So, what do I say? Elected people need to be able to reach out and work across the board with all kinds of people, because you need to cooperate, you need to be fair, and you need to represent your constituents. October 7 to me was, I cried for 2 weeks. No one reached out to me. I have relatives in Israel, I have friends in Israel, and I couldn't believe that they didn't reach out to say, how's Emily? You know, how's so? They just didn't. It was shocking to me. And what has been going on since, and with all of our research and working with these candidates, I just feel that we all need to pay attention locally and more so, because we have a chance to elect people who care about us as people, because there's tons of anti-Semitism here every single day, and it is heartbreaking, and it makes me sad, and it makes me angry. There's just one piece, and I will turn it over because I'm not organized. I caution people to be neutral when you listen. Don't jump on what you hear and what you say, because you need to reach out and find out more about them. And what I found shocking about the candidates, they didn't know, most of them knew nothing about Jews or Israel. They really didn't, at least the ones that I was in the interviews with. So be open, be aware, vote, get everybody to vote. And it's going to be a very close election, people, and it's really important. Thank goodness the League of Women Voters, they do a good job helping to educate, and others do as well. But what we have done, narrowly examining these people, it's amazing. And I look forward to working with them again and getting more of you to work on these issues.
Thank you. Michael, can you give us a little bit of background, history on our district and the changing landscape of the district and how we got to this moment, and a little bit about all the recent events?
Yes, and quick correction, we are called Jewish Community and Friends for Democracy, so the full name has Jewish in it.
Thank you.
So a little bit of background on our own district, the 7th Congressional District. This district has actually only been represented by 2 different people over the last 53 years. First, Cardis Collins, rep from 1973 to 1997. She was one of the first African-American women elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, doing so 2 years after New York's Shirley Chisholm. Mrs. Collins, that's a picture of our very gerrymandered district. After Mrs. Collins, in 1997, Danny Davis won election, and he has been in the role that he has now for 15 terms. Is pretty high number of repeat elections. This is the first open primary with no incumbent in a generation. Since the early 70s, the district has been a majority African American. Due to a combination of both the gerrymander that occurred in 2020 and demographic changes in the district, and especially on the west side, the balance of that district is now actually changed. It's now about 42% African American, about 30% white, 16% Hispanic, 9% Asian, and a very small percentage of 2% people identifying as mixed race in some way. The district, as you just saw, is very oddly shaped, in that it's gerrymandered in a way that includes both the west side, but significantly also includes parts of the south side, including West Englewood, Chicago Lawn, and Grand Boulevard. So it goes straight south and then west-south from that direction. It also includes the entire west side of the city, beginning in the downtown area, so it actually includes a huge chunk of the loop. It also goes further out, beyond us, and River Forest, of course, we're River Forest. It goes out to Maywood, to Bellwood, Forest Park, Westchester, and also includes a sliver of Elmwood Park and Hillside. The total population is 750,000 people in the district. 2 small fun facts, since I keep it light. Technically, this was Abraham Lincoln's congressional district. Abraham Lincoln represented this 7th Congressional District from 1847 to 1849 in the Whig Party. He wasn't even a Republican yet. This district looked very different, included enormous swaths of downstate. Lincoln hated Congress, came back to Illinois after only 1 term. The second fun fact is from 1932 to 1952, this district was represented by a Jewish person, Adolph Sabbath, who was actually the president of the Washington Boulevard Temple, which would then, in 10 or 15 years, become the Oak Park Temple beginning in 1956. So the Jewish community actually has strong association with the district. The district used to be the Jewish West Side, and Oak Park was a part of it. But traditionally, that was the base until the 1950s. As to this present election in our own project, I just wanted to point out a couple things. Besides just wanting to see how the candidates understood the issues that are close to the Jewish community, we also, and Hillary alluded to this, we saw a role as potentially educational. Since we would meet these candidates one-on-one in homes, they had the ability to really ask us questions, to seek clarity as to what we were talking about. And we also were able to draw up basic fact sheets about the Jewish community, about our population, and about the increased manifestations and statistics about those manifestations of anti-Semitism that we were seeing, and we handed them out to them. So they actually physically got takeaways out of these meetings. But given that this was the first open primary in a generation or more, we also thought it's probably really our only chance to capture this level of interest from candidates whose victory would depend upon a narrow margin of a few thousand, or maybe even a few hundred votes. Just to give context to what Sandra alluded to, primary elections, even in the Democratic Party, and this is a district plus 30, this is a Democratic plus 34 district, meaning this is the only election. No Republican is winning in the fall. Primary elections are historically low turnout events, especially in these off years. We are in an off year from a presidential election. In the 2024 primary, 75,000 or so votes were cast. That was more than the number in 2022, which was just shy of 70,000. That's the election where Keena Collins came closest to defeating Danny Davis in the primary. She was within 6 points of him. Given that there are about 5 or 6 candidates that will draw probably real support across this district, you're looking at dividing a number that's about 70,000. You're looking at an election that can really only be won by a couple thousand votes, one way or the other. So really every vote does count. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank all of you. And now on our plan is to have each of you share in this 1-minute assessment on each candidate.
So I go first because my assessment is slightly longer than a minute because it has an important caveat that will come up for somebody else's later. So
Sounds good.
I'm going to start with Keena Collins since I just mentioned her. We had a chance to talk to Keena Collins. We identified that she valued relations with the members of the Jewish community. She appreciated our community's historical involvement with the civil rights movement and told us that she was really open to deepening her understanding of our perspective. At the same time, she has made very inconsistent statements, to say the least, regarding Israel and its defense, both in public and in the interview we had with her. In the past, she has condemned Hamas's terrorist attack on October 7th, but she also, at the same time, I believe, on October 16th, vocally called for ceasefire in the Israel-Gaza conflict without also demanding a hostage release. Of particular concern to us is a statement that she made on the Ben Joravsky show. Ben Joravsky was once a political commentator for the Chicago Reader. Now he has his own podcast. He used to be on one of the AM radio stations. He's had her on a few times. In the past summer, she made a sort of lengthy statement about the war in Gaza, which we believe veered into an anti-Semitic trope, generally speaking, about Israel and about Jewish people. She was suggesting in that statement, and you can listen to it on the podcast, that aid to Israel was necessarily taking money from the potential provision of universal health care and potential gun control measures. So effectively a kind of trade-off. Why is there money going to Israel when there could be money going towards these other causes? So that gave us concern. In our meeting with her and in statements that she made to the Jewish United Fund, which did a survey, Collins endorsed the two-state solution while recognizing in that statement a democratic Jewish state of Israel and a viable independent Palestinian state, and also recognizing how far away that possibility seemed without real pressure, as she put it, on the parties. She did recognize that Hamas was not a partner for peace and identified it in writing in JUF and to us as a terrorist organization. We originally rated her a bit more highly because of statements like that, but then, and this is going to probably go long, in early March, so just recently, during the time there was some of you may be familiar with this guide called the Girl I Guess Guide to Illinois Local Elections, which is a frankly, very left-wing guide. I think that the person who put it together would agree, in which she evaluates all the candidates in all of the races downstate in all of Illinois, but had a section on the congressional races. And she had a section in the congressional races, the woman who writes the Girl I Guess Guide, her name is Stephanie Skora, where she has a Palestine litmus test. So in every congressional race that she evaluated, she would not endorse any candidate unless they had the following policies or equivalents in their publicly available platform or would otherwise commit to them publicly. Number one, an immediate end to the occupation and I'm quoting this directly, colonization of Arab lands and a dismantling of the West Bank barrier and West Bank apartheid wall. 2, full Palestinian civil and human rights in their country of origin, whether that country remains Israel, is transformed into a secular binational state, or takes a different national formation, but occupies any of the substantive borders of contemporary or historical Palestine. 3, the right of Palestinian refugees in diaspora to return to their homes in their country of origin. Then she continues and says this is the only evaluation that the only litmus test she's applying to any candidate in any race, and then get effed Israel. Those are her own words, that's in the guide. So we had originally evaluated Keena Collins, and then the guide put out its endorsement. Its initial endorsement was for Annabelle Mendoza. We will mention Annabelle Mendoza. Annabelle Mendoza is explicitly anti-Zionist. But then, shortly after putting that out, the guide all of a sudden changed its endorsement to pending and removed all recommendation. And so that took a period of about 2 weeks. In the beginning of March, we understand there was outreach from both Anthony Driver and Keena Collins campaigns, and then the guide changed its endorsement and endorsed Anthony Driver. But it included the following on its new litmus test standard. So now it has now this was the litmus test that Anthony Driver and Keena Collins were required to take. The candidates who pass the litmus test and is winning, as determined by a combination of polling, fundraising, endorsements, ground game, and the overall state of the race as of the night before the guide's launch, will be awarded the Girl I Guess endorsement. It is difficult to determine which candidate is winning based on available data. The endorsement will be awarded to the candidate who has the furthest left position of Palestine. That is their statement. So Collins, as part of her attempt to meet these standards, we think, added a new section to her website called My Commitment to Justice and Accountability, where she has a section called Standing for Palestinian Liberation, and that section reads, "The ongoing genocide in Palestine is a stain on our collective conscience. My position remains unwavering. We must demand an immediate and permanent ceasefire, an end to the illegal occupation, and the decolonization of Arab lands. I will fight for full human and civil rights, ensuring every Palestinian lives with dignity and equality under the law, statehood and sovereignty, the formal recognition of Palestinian statehood, the right of return, upholding the fundamental right of all forcibly displaced Palestinians to return to their ancestral homes. We cannot achieve," this is in Keena Collins' website, "we cannot achieve true peace as long as our tax dollars are used to subsidize apartheid. I am ready to stand on the right side of history." So the view we've taken as a group, we are a Zionist organization, the endorsement of a right of return to pre-1967 Israel territory by all Palestinian refugees' descendants, that's effectively what the standard is here. That's about 5 million people. In our view, is effectively a roundabout endorsement of a one-state Palestinian state rather than the two states for two peoples formula that has guided American policy for 30 years. But Collins also has not withdrawn her support for the two-state solution either, so our view reflects that caveated rating. So that was a very long thing, but it was important to explain this guide because this guide did change at least 2 or 3 candidates' views. So that's Keena Collins. I have 2 more. These will be much quicker. This other candidate we looked at and spoke to is Rory Hoskins. Rory Hoskins, as some of you may know, is the mayor of Forest Park. Our view is that he is a true advocate for the Jewish community, not only through word, but through deed. He not only cares deeply about anti-Semitism, but he actually instituted policy as mayor of Forest Park that directly addressed this and rejected that which fostered it. While he was mayor in 2020 during the COVID crisis, there was a spate of swastikas that were being painted all over mailboxes in Forest Park. Hoskins told us he was horrified by this, made sure that he directed the police to remove them every time he saw them and to paint over them. He also implemented the adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Association, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism in Forest Park, one of actually very few towns and villages to do so, and so that's something that's worth noting. He also began a partnership at the same time with the Chabad of Oak Park River Forest, and they did a public Hanukkah candlelighting ceremony during his tenure, and it's something that he has done consistently since. He is acutely aware of the impact of ignoring and not educating people about anti-Semitism. He understands the historical roots of growing anti-Semitism and the intersection of this in its current form with anti-Zionism. He has a depth of knowledge and critical thinking that we think would make him a strong leader for addressing issues of concern for this community and others. And he has not changed public messaging since we interviewed him in January. So he has not changed his views or said anything that makes us think he's inconsistent. One last one, Melissa Conyers-Ervin. She has a warm relationship to the Jewish community. I think that's how we evaluated her. In her time when she was Chicago City Treasurer, she's appeared as a speaker at numerous Chicago synagogues. She's participated in the menorah lighting ceremonies at City Hall, even up into and including this past year. She's been outspoken in her support of the hostages taken by Hamas. She was a signatory to a letter published by Tablet Magazine in October 2023, supporting and demanding the release of the hostages and chastising and criticizing, of course, Hamas. She has committed herself to supporting Israel in the face of security threats, and it's noted in many places. She's opening to learn more about those security needs of our community. And in this context, we talked about synagogue security and the way that the House can appropriate funding that can be used towards those potential grants. And I would also note that she is officially opposed to BDS and has indicated an unwillingness to compromise her commitment to Israel's defense to appease certain anti-Israel voices within the Democratic Party. And I note, of course, that we've probably all been inundated with a lot of advertising about Melissa Kinders-Irvin, and it's been criticized because it comes from external AIPAC-supported PACs. That may come up later, but that is something to note that you will hear about her. So I will turn it over here.
I have to cover LaShawn Ford and Richard Boykin, both of whom I've known for many, many years. Our meeting with LaShawn went very well, even though he didn't appreciate our evaluation, which was pretty good, actually. He was not very knowledgeable about Jewish issues or Israel at all, but he was very open to learning more. I have known and worked with him prior to his being elected state rep, and he has done a very good job. And of course, with the gerrymandering, he had a larger portion of Oak Park, and then it became smaller, but it's all gerrymandered around. I've met with him many times after I retired with the League of Women Voters, and he was always open to good communication and follow up and follow through, and he's been a good legislator. He did have an issue, which has been on television, horrible ads. Yes, he did get in trouble, and he was eventually, what's the word? Acquitted.
Not fully.
But,
Not fully, he pled guilty to a small
and
misdemeanor.
he did give money. Well, you
Can
left out.
you tell more about the ads?
Well, it had to do with money, and it had to do with, utilizing money for things that he shouldn't have done. He was a teacher. He was almost going to be a priest. He raised as a single father. He lives in Austin, and again, he was exonerated. That was the word, exonerated, actually. So the ads only have part of the story, and unfortunately, or fortunately, however you all want to look at it, he was doing pretty well, and the ads have really hurt his campaign, which is kind of sad in a way, because he knows how to legislate, and he has done that well, and so, in my opinion, he could be a good leader and is very willing to work with our Jewish community as well as the Jewish community. And he had never been to Israel, but he was interested in going to Israel, depending on what happens in the campaign. So, in terms of his character, I will say he's been a realtor, a teacher and a realtor. And my son, one of our sons, who is a realtor, had been working with him, as well as they were single male guys during that era. And he called our son up to say, I think this is before he got in trouble, I think we should not do business together. So I thought that was a very ethical thing to do, because something was going to happen and he didn't want Andrew to be stuck with it. Anyway, that's LaShawn. Richard Boykin, I've also known for many, many years. He worked for Danny Davis in Washington, in his office there and in his office here. He was a go-to person to get information and represented Congressman Davis exceedingly well. He eventually became our Cook County Commissioner, and he did a very good job. And then, poof, he voted against the soda tax. And the Democratic Party, specifically Ms. Preckwinkle, destroyed him, and he lost the next election. He was the most knowledgeable, actually. He had been to Israel. He loved going to Israel, and he had lots of good, positive things. Both of these gentlemen talked about what a wonderful job we did as a group. He thought, what a great way to communicate it should continue in terms of bringing people together to work together and do good policy for their communities that they represent. That's that.
Okay, I'm going to keep mine very short. And just as a disclaimer, much of what I'm saying is on the website with a little bit of more information added. I'm going to be doing Jason Friedman and Thomas Fisher. Before speaking about Jason Friedman, I would like to reiterate that we are only looking at one set of issues. There are many candidates who would be our ally if elected. However, on our issues, Friedman was the candidate who we needed to probe the least extensively. We'd ask the first question, and he would address everything. In fact, on occasion, we learned from him. This candidate had an unusual depth of knowledge and experience that he is ready to bring to bear on behalf of the Jewish community, both locally and nationally, as an articulate spokesperson if elected to Congress. He would not only be sensitive to our issues if elected, but his knowledge and understanding of the concerns of our community would position him to be a legislative leader in this vital area. He is committed to peace and security of Israel while recognizing the legitimate interest of the Palestinians. Okay, Thomas Fisher. Thomas Fisher expressed a strong interest in including all voices from our diverse community and creating conditions that will address hate in all forms. He provided somewhat equivocal answers, however, to questions about left-wing anti-Semitism, Zionism, and Israel, including support for Israel's right to defend itself. His idealism about getting along at times appeared to lump Jewish concerns with those of other groups without addressing the ways in which anti-Semitism operates differently from other forms of discrimination and hate. In specific, shortly after the Bondi Beach shootings, he called out the need for greater security, but he never once mentioned the Jewish community in his statement. Despite some equivocation, Dr. Fisher exhibited an openness to understand the specific challenges of our community it is facing, and to listening to and learning more about our concerns.
Yeah, so I think you may be hearing some of the tension between our wanting to impart information and develop a relationship with the candidates and really questioning them and being critical. And so we struggled with that tension through the project because, you know, we wanted to build relationships at the same time as we were evaluating. And sometimes the candidates weren't happy with the evaluations, but we had to manage that. That was just one of the challenges that we were dealing with. I'm gonna talk about the three youngest candidates in the race. Annabelle Mendoza, who's 28 years old, Reed Showalter, who's 32, and Anthony Driver, who is also 32. They are the three youngest, and they are all progressives who bill themselves as fighting for the people and against the people they view as oppressive forces in our country. Annabelle Mendoza is a strident anti-Zionist who's made demonization of Israel, AIPAC, and calls for the right of return of Palestinians to Arab lands, which is a platform of the Democratic Socialist Party as well as the Girl I Guess guide. She's been on that bandwagon for a long time, since the beginning of her campaign. She was posting stuff on her webpage that had Free Palestine symbolism on it. Her central issue has been ICE and ICE abuse. She's the only one of the 10 candidates that we reached out to who refused to meet with us. We believe, therefore, she would not speak for our community or advocate for our community if elected. Reed Showalter, who happens to be our next door neighbor, which was great, nice. Reed Showalter was very open, and he was our actually first meeting. He expressed concern about rising anti-Semitism, but his recent rhetoric has been increasingly strident against Israel. His main issue in his campaign is corporate power and greed and monopolization, squeezing out working class people. He did have a more nuanced understanding of the issues of concern to us, which when we spoke to him, and we believed he spoke favorably to us about the two-state solution, and yet he turned around and attacked his fellow candidates for supporting exactly that in a Facebook posting, and then Michael and Phyllis Rubin wrote a wonderful op-ed in the Wednesday Journal that pointed out his terrible misuse of a synagogue forum to present an attack of that nature, and really turned around a question that he was asked about Zionism to be an attack, really an anti-Zionist attack. He's used very inflammatory rhetoric about Israel's alleged genocide. He's called for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu and really centered anti-Israel positions in his campaign. I'm sad to say that I was going to give a strong statement of support of Anthony Driver, and instead we have changed our evaluation of Anthony Driver. He came across as a much more nuanced and less strident candidate. He has a background as policy director of the Service Employees International Union and a leader in the fight for the minimum wage and on police accountability issues. He had an impressive knowledge of left-wing anti-Semitism and expressed a commitment to representing the Jewish community and an understanding that was unusual of Black-Jewish historical relationships. He was challenged at a forum at UIC to return money from Democratic donor Michael Sachs, which was labeled as tainted AIPAC money. He took that bait. He did return the money. And then he also posted the Democratic Socialist platform, also the Girl I Guessed required platform, in support of the right of the return of Palestinians to well, it's unclear what the exact borders they're talking about, but it is not just the occupied territories. It's if you call them occupied territory, the West Bank. We think he made a devil's bargain in order to get these endorsements. We had to reevaluate him because we think he did directly contradict his statement to us that he would not take that bait, essentially. He would not take on the cause of the anti-Zionists in order to get elected, but that seems to be exactly what he has done. We've posted a reevaluation of both him and Keena Collins in our webpage on March 3rd. So I had planned to tell you he was a bright light in the field, but I can't say that anymore. He may backpedal. Again, he's not as strident as the other two in his rhetoric, and I think he does know better, but that's what we're facing right now. So that's what I had to say.
Thank you so much. Well, before we open up the questions to everybody here and online, I do have one question. A number of you have talked about building relationship with the candidates and them learning from you as well as you interviewing them. Do you have anything you could tell us about what they learned from you in the interview process? Anything?
I have one. Sorry. Hello, yes. One topic that came up was the BDS movement. I think there's a couple of candidates, mostly on the progressive left-wing side, who took the position that, well, boycotts are an acceptable form of speech, and I take the ACLU's position that that's an acceptable thing. And I explained to them that's not what the BDS movement is. The BDS movement is a movement currently constituted to effectively outlaw all communications partnerships with any component of Israeli civil society. We told them that it poses its own extraordinary litmus test on cultural and educational activities and on Israelis, period. It's not, so the impression that everybody had when we first broached this is that this is really a movement about weapons manufacturers and that they're really just trying to get certain weapons manufacturers not to receive certain funding from government sources. But if you actually read the detailed elements of the BDS movement, and Diane was able to give examples from the way the BDS movement works in social left-wing organizations, and Hillary was able to give examples as to how it functions in academic organizations. And I think we really opened some candidates' eyes as to what they're being effectively pushed. They're being pushed into endorsing without fully understanding. So I think that was actually very helpful for us to get that idea into some of their heads.
Did that come up in every conversation or many of them?
Yeah, it did, but the details of it came up the most when we got into some of the more progressive candidate conversations.
Yeah, I would say I was surprised at how little they acknowledged about left-wing anti-Semitism, period. And so it was sort of refreshing when the few candidates did understand it, including, it seemed, Anthony Driver did, when we met with him. Because he had experienced it in the unions. He directly said, he didn't sign up for that. It wasn't the fight he was there for, and he did see this kind of litmus test being applied. The other thing was the lack of knowledge of Zionism and what it means. I think that almost none of the candidates could give a really good definition. I mean, sometimes they would just equate it with Israel. Several of the good candidates, actually, the ones that we evaluated better, did say, well, it means supporting Israel, which isn't quite. On the other hand, Jason Friedman gave us a textbook definition of Zionism is the belief in the self-determination of the Jewish people in a portion of their biblical lands. That was the answer he gave, and I thought that was just a perfect definition, a portion of the biblical lands, emphasizing the historical connection of the Jewish people to the land. So, so that was, we were surprised in both directions, I would say, by the knowledge in some cases and by the lack of knowledge in others.
I just want to say something really positive was I really felt coming away, which is a little scary because what I'm going to say means there's much more work to be done, but we're just scratching the surface. There's a lot, as has been stated by many of us, the lack of knowledge about these issues. We have a responsibility to educate people, and there's been a lot of misinformation against us, and I'm really aware that there's work to be done, and I'm hoping that all of you will help us do it.
So we'll take a few questions. Here's a question. Without a specific endorsement, how can the community prevent us from fracturing our political vote with Jewish and Israel concerns and missing an opportunity to advance a specific candidate?
I think that that's an interesting question, but we also realized even within our group, we had different stance on issues not related to this one issue. And so we felt strongly we're not in a position to tell people who to vote for, but we felt strongly that if people cared about this issue, we wanted them to be aware, given the candidate they were going to select, where they stood on Israel and the Jewish community. But we made a strong opinion, a decision not to tell anyone because there's so many more issues. But we would tell you, if you care about these issues, there's clearly candidates you should not vote for.
So I'd like to add something to that. I totally agree with what Hillary said. It's because I guess I must be strange, but I went to 4 or 5 forums in addition to the work that we did individually. And I listened and I watched and I took notes. Then I followed up my own fact-checking on the candidates with people I know who knew them or knew of them. So we were narrowly focused, but that's not how we are going to vote, I don't think. And we'll all have our own opinions. I was not as enthralled with some of Diane's excitement over some of the young ones from the get-go. And even though the questions, were answered and seemingly okay, but then poof, it changed. So several of the candidates who have not been out there, the negative ones, against Israel and Jewish people, et cetera, which they don't even see or understand it. One of my elected official friends wants to know why a certain elected official who's Jewish is so anti-Semitic. Well, can I explain that? But it's all out there too, because of differences of opinions and education. I mean, folks, educated or not, they're not knowledgeable. Unless you really know somebody and work with the people, you have to look at all sides and vote, and I'll say it again, and look forward to educating, and several of the candidates who I think are good potential candidates want to know more about Jewish people, about Israel, et cetera, and that's a good thing.
Thank you. More coming. We'll take a few more. It's a good question here. Did their electability factor in the conversations in your
The
assessment?
answer is no, I believe.
So there was a threshold that we, oops, I have to turn this on.
It's on, we hear you.
Okay. We had a threshold to start with that we took. There was early on an article in the Wednesday Journal, and there was discussion of 10 candidates there. It talked about the threshold of raising money. Keena Collins hadn't met that threshold at the time, and there continued to be some questions about her fundraising, but because she had run in the past and done well, we included her. And there was mention of Reed Showalter and Annabelle Mendoza in that article too, as having developed a stronger campaign. We excluded 3 candidates who are in the race but had not met that threshold. Frankly, when we went into this, we weren't sure we were going to get any interviews. So we were really, that's another thing that surprised me, was that just how willing and eager even the candidates were to meet with us. And so our timing was good, and we were able to do all those interviews in a short period of time.
Did you ask the candidates about the Daily Center protests? I guess the anti-ICE protests that are going on, and if so, what did they say?
Is that referring to the one that you had attended?
Maybe it's probably the one you attended? That was at the Daily
I
Center?
think it was only in the form of the slogan question, because we were asking them, how did they, feel about the slogans, the globalize the Intifada, from the river to the sea, free Palestine. We did get some arguments that free Palestine is just in favor of freedom, but Jewish people don't necessarily hear it that way. So we did have a discussion of slogans, but not so much about the specific rally or events that had caused us to come together.
Sounds good. We'll take a few more.
This is 3.
3, okay. Maybe the last 3. Please explain, if you can, who is funding the ads against LaShawn?
Fair Shake PAC. That is a crypto fund based PAC. You can read about them. The reason that they are focused on LaShawn Ford is because while he was in state office, LaShawn Ford was either a co-endorser, primary endorser of some, in my mind, sorry, this is my personal view as a securities attorney, relatively insignificant in the scheme of things legislation that would have regulated the crypto industry and required some registration for a somewhat simple registration scheme for crypto. State crypto laws would probably be preempted by federal crypto laws, which are in formulation right now by the SEC and the CFTC. So I frankly think this is relatively irrelevant, but they are spending, I believe, $1.5 million on this PAC against him. They're funding, just contextually, because everyone's hearing about AIPAC, they're actually giving more money in their PAC than the AIPAC PAC is giving in its PAC in this race. So just so you know, crypto.
Maybe a final question, and this takes us to looking ahead. Will you be researching other races in the future, and how can the local Jewish community get involved in supporting your work and getting involved?
I wanted to take that, and I have a specific sign-up sheet here. Yes, the answer is probably yes. I mean, we have to chart our direction. We need to expand our group. We did hope to do additional interviews on the committeeman race, but it was a very intense project, so I think but we do want to continue to meet with leaders in our community, and then there's some issues specifically that we want to maybe take up, including improving Black-Jewish relationships and building, looking to the future and educating younger leaders. So we are looking for people to join and to sign up, and we will send out, and we have here a sign-up sheet, which Andy, I think, has available. Specific things that we're looking for are, communication, social media expertise, administrative and organizational support, community outreach and relationship building, a politics background, and tech skills. All those things are things that we're looking to expand our reach.
Just since we have an audience here, we are planning on doing something later in the spring on anti-Semitism through a Latino lens, and we hope to make that a bilingual event. And Octavio, who's a member of our congregation, who I think might be on Zoom somewhere, will be working with us on that. So we're really trying to educate the community and people who we think we should partner with versus having them not being not our allies, but our enemies possibly.
Thank you so much. Any last words?
I just want to make a final statement. I think that this, let's call it an experiment at first, but I think it's a program, is a great opportunity for us to strengthen our relationship with some of the leaders, and I think we can call them leaders, that we spoke with in this race. Many of these candidates are likely coming back in other races down the road, even if they lose this month. Just a couple examples. We got Rory Hoskins, who is currently the mayor of Forest Park, and I think we as a community, as a Jewish community, should continue to work closely with him as an ally. Some of the local activists are probably going to run for office down the road locally, so some of these activists they may not be in sympathy with our views right now, but we shouldn't cut anyone off. Mr. Ford, if he doesn't win, he's currently in the State House, and it's currently contemplating a anti-BDS bill, which is a bill, Illinois has a legislative action bill from I think 12 or 13 years ago, which is effectively a bill that bans the boycott, divestment, sanction of functioning in Illinois. Illinois cannot participate in BDS-type activity as a sort of matter of state law. There is a legislative attempt now to reverse that through some kind of reversal of that bill, and it hasn't gotten significant enough sponsors, but we do obviously have the ability to continue to do outreach, and Mr. Ford is state representative. There are other state representatives that cover the area just surrounding us, and so I think that is another way for engagement.
We've also become much more aware of these issues ourselves and had new relationships throughout the Jewish community in Chicago and nationally even. And the hope is that other communities will take on a project just like this to engage with their own local leaders. Oh, Phyllis, what am I?
Anybody who wants to volunteer and help us, I'll come around and give you a form.
Okay.
Don't all raise your hand at one time.
Just thank you to everyone who's here this evening, whether here or on Zoom. We really appreciate this. I think if we could tell you who to vote for and how this work, when we sit and talk about this, which we do among ourselves, sort of what's really going to happen, and there's all these polls out there that their candidates do themselves, and of course they have them always doing well in their own particular polls. But most importantly, please vote, and we also encourage you to share our website with other people who might be interested in this information, because I think it's something that's not easily accessible if they try to do it on their own, and we'd really love for you to share with other people. So thank you very much.
I need to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry. In regards to voting, you can vote in person at Village Hall. There's a lot of misinformation on the website. I had a call today from a friend who went to Maywood to vote, and it wasn't there. Also, some of the precincts have been changed, so make sure you look at your new voter registration cards that you recently got in the mail. So again, please do vote early, not often, but certainly vote.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to reiterate, wearing my rabbinic hat, that it's a mitzvah to vote. It's considered, it is considered a mitzvah to vote and take part in the democratic process. Thank you to the 4 of you and to the 10 of you, everyone who's involved. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And thank you. Phyllis, go ahead.
Apparently, everybody is going to get a survey about this whole
You'll be here.
event and learning about this, so fill it out. I hope so.
You'll be receiving a survey, and that will help us have other events like this. Again, we'll be hosting an event in the next few months about anti-Semitism in the Latino community, and that may be just the beginning of a longer series. Thank you so much for your sacred work. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.